Hello guys, welcome back to another video. This is Dragagon, and in this one we're going to be covering the Iranokh guide along with the two trash packs that come before Iranokh, because I believe those are quite some obstacles as well to overwin, and I feel like these were actually harder than the boss fight itself. So starting off, I'll explain that this boss fight has, well, these packs and the boss fight has two realities. It has a dark realm and a reality realm, the one you're in all the time basically. You don't have to worry about that. Just know that there's a dark realm, and the raid will be split into two groups to equalize DPS. So make sure you have about an equal force divided over those two groups. And both of these groups need to clear the packs at the same time within a 5-second margin. So when you kill one pack, when one group clears one pack, then the other group has about 5 seconds left to clear their pack before it's a full wipe. So make sure you communicate very well at the end of the pack. Usually when we had one monster left, I would hop into the other Discord channel and I communicate with them how much percentage is left and so on. So it's important that you kill them at the same time. There are two encounters before Iranokh, so there are two trash packs to do that each group has to do, so basically 4 in total, but you only have to really do 2. The first encounter consists of sparks, shadow spawn and a fire spawn. Focus the fire spawn and the passive AoE will take care of the sparks. Remember that tanks need to kite the fire spawn when he's dropping the circle around him. It's important to give the tank some time at the start of the encounter so that he can generate enough aggro to hold them during combat, because once he loses it, he cannot grab it back. The sparks are immune to downs and will just beat on whatever DPS till he's dead. Use the shadow spawn as reference to communicate with the other group in order to kill them together. You'll have a margin of 5 seconds, like I said, to kill them at the same time as your other group. The second encounter consists of destroyer hounds, the same ones that spawn on Heatus. These apply armor decreasing debuffs on your tank, so CCing them will be required. Along with those come 3 winged destroyers, which are the trickiest of the pack. CCing here will be again very important, so everything points to a group up and an IDOI rotation. There's also one fierce destroyer that the tank will have to keep its eyes on and interrupt his extermination as soon as it's casting it. If the tank fails doing so, it most likely is a one-shot on the tank, so really pay attention to this, it's very important. The DPS should focus the winged destroyers on AoE and rotate Eidos fires at the same time to keep them from charging and applying debuffs. Once you run out of IDOI, focus on single CCs and class AoE CCs to keep them still occupied until they're dead. Just as with the shadow spawn from the previous pack, use the fierce destroyer as a reference point to finish the pack at the same time as the other group. Every time you successfully finish the trash, you'll be thrown out of the dark realm with a debuff that needs to be purified, so keep those mass pures ready. Worth noting is that when you are in these dark realms by entering the dark rifts, you'll be taking constant damage. These last two mechanics are repeating on the Iranokh boss fight, so remember these. The Iranokh boss fight. Again, this boss fight consists out of a mechanic where there are two realms, the default one you're in all the time and a dark realm. You enter the dark realm by entering the dark rift, and you exit the dark realm by killing the ball in the blue circle. It throws you back through reality to your own realm, but with an unstable debuff that needs to be purified, just as what happened when finishing the trash packs. As the boss fight starts, the fight has 4 phases. Phase 1 goes from 100 to 65%. This phase is the clock phase. A big arm moves like a clock around Iranokh and makes the area where it's passed lethal. The trick is to look at the direction the boss is facing and get there as quick as possible. If you are on the slower side, simply rotate around the boss towards the left until you get to the same position. Once in position, Iranokh will throw Senior Darkness at random players. These players need to move away from the group in order to get purified. It's important to be away from others as it jumps over and debuffs other players upon purify. This debuff builds stacks by 12 per second as the player has this debuff, so doing it as fast as possible is recommended. If you build 100 of these stacks, it throws you into the dark realm where a slow death awaits. Try to remain as close as possible to the boss without a debuff so that there is enough space for those with a debuff to quarantine themselves. At the same time, waves are spawning at the outer end of the boss room and the tank has to go and absorb these while your second tank holds aggro on Iranokh. These waves deal damage and build up the same debuffs from Senior Darkness on the tanks for each wave they take. We had our tank absorb everything, ending with 96 stacks, so right before the dark realm. Once all waves are done, the boss will reposition the clock and repeat the mechanic. The rest here depends on your raid's DPS to move to the next phase at 65%. If you're weaker on DPS and do this mechanic multiple times, make sure to have the tanks alternate the aggro and wave mechanic so neither gets 100 stacks and avoid being sent to the dark realm. Phase 2 goes from 65 to 35%. At 65, Iranokh starts the phase by casting Into the Darkness, which as the ability hints, sends the raid into the dark realm. Everyone will take constant damage, just as with the Trashpacks, so this is where rotating the support's defense is recommended. Move as a raid into the blue circle and kill the Node of Darkness in order to escape the Dark Realm. If players are not inside the circle by the time the node dies, they will be left behind in the Dark Realm to die. Players in a different realm cannot target each other, so it's hard to help people stay alive. As a mechanic introduction, Iranokh will cast Banishment right after coming back from the Dark Realm, which will push everyone away from the Iranokh. He will try to push you off the boss's area, so try moving yourself to one of the many walls to catch you and avoid being pushed off. From here, have the raid stack at the wall so they find themselves between the wall and Iranokh. At the same time, tanks move Iranokh slightly away from the wall to create space and then position themselves between the raid and Iranokh. Iranokh will drop frontal cones on random players that the tank has to catch, similar to Hoof in OBS and the third boss in Silent Whirlpool Combat Dungeon. You remain here until 35% of Iranokh's HP. He usually does another banishment push before 35%, but this largely depends on your raid's DPS. Iranokh might spawn phantoms meanwhile that will try to throw cones on your players, so the tanks have to focus on catching them. At 35%, have your raid run through the boss towards the blue circle, as that is when Iranokh will cast Into the Darkness again. It's important that the raid moves through the boss so that the tanks have an easy time catching the spears. Before killing the node, however, you can now kill the phantoms as you are in the Dark Realm, again while rotating your defenses to stay alive. Tanks move with the raid to move the phantoms on top of the Node of Darkness, so passive AoE can contribute. If you kill the node before killing the phantom, it will keep throwing spears at your players while more phantoms will spawn. Your tanks will be outnumbered by the spears and it's a slow wipe from here. So focus the phantom as soon as you enter the Dark Realm, then clear the node to exit the Dark Realm, followed by a mass purify. It's worth noting at this point that the banishment pushes are no longer happening since phase 3 starts past 35%. Phase 3, 35 to 15%. Iranokh will spawn Dark Rift so that you can escape to the Dark Realm when he casts Reality Collapse. Every player still in the normal realm by the time he casts Reality Collapse will be dead, so pay attention to where the Dark Rift spawns. Right after, he'll also cast Dark Collapse, which is the same for the Dark Realm, so you want to spend as little time as possible in these Dark Realms, so shift yourselves to the Node of Darkness and clear these as fast as possible. This whole rift hopping thing continues until Iranokh reaches 15%. Phase 4 is 15% until death. At 15%, Iranokh will cast Dark Spheres, which are balls that will chase random players and one-shot these if it reaches them. At the same time, 6 randomly chosen players are going to have a shield assigned to them. They simply run into one of these balls to destroy it and protect your raid from certain death. Taking one of such balls will consume the shield, so only do one and leave the rest to the raid. From 35% to the end, Iranokh still throws spears at random players, so try to remain stacked as a raid behind tanks so they have an easy time catching the spears. Hey guys, I hope you liked the video. It took me a while to make this. It's been a while since I did the boss video. The costume you see right here on the screen is the one that drops from Iranokh. So if you like this one, this is the one that drops from it. This is the full set. And the boss also drops 4 Draconic Relics rather than 2 compared to the other bosses from Nihil's Bill. I like the boss fight. It's a lot more interactive for the whole raid rather than, for example, Hades where only tanks do most of the work and DPSs are only pressing 1, 2, 3. Iranokh has way more mechanics going on. The whole raid basically has to follow in order to survive and stay alive and kill it. So the more people that make mistakes, the slower it's gonna be, and then the more punishing it's for the raid. So I like that really much. I like to see that back in raids. What I dislike about Iranokh is that it dies quite fast. Like combat only takes about several minutes compared to other games like World of Warcraft, other big MMOs out there like Final Fantasy. They have boss fights that last a lot longer. So I would really hope that we're gonna see longer boss fights in the future. And maybe we're gonna see new raids at some point. I do hope we're gonna get new raids so that we can get some more raiding happening. Because right now it's very limited in raiding content. Like only 4 videos is enough to cover everything in raiding in this game. So that's quite limiting. But alright, that's enough rambling from me. I hope this video is helpful to you guys. I hope this is gonna be helpful for newer people. Returning players that want to start raiding are gonna figure out easier how to do certain things that they really get stuck on. So that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.